Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to another tips and tricks dungeon analysis guide walkthrough video. This is a level 19 Tol Dagor, completed with my team. Different tank than the one you saw in the Waycrest. This is our Death Knight tank, Snap, but otherwise the same team that you saw in that most recent video before this one. So this is 19 Tol Dagor. The affixes are Tyrannical, Raging, Volcanic, and of course Infested. We start off here with a big pull. We pull basically all the packs that don't include an infested mob because we don't want to deal with CCing stuff. We have a pre-meta and a pre-incarnation going on from our Moonkin and our Demon Hunter, so we just want to get our globals on AoE as soon as possible for those two, and you can see they're doing huge burst AoE right at the start of this while they're in those cooldowns. So the way that works is if you meta or incarn right before the keystone starts, you actually get to keep it going into the start of the key, and it's off cooldown as well, so you can then use it again on the boss. Since this is a tyrannical week, they are both also going to want to be able to use that on the boss. I, by contrast, don't have any such ability as an Assassination Rogue, so I just fire off a Vendetta on one of these things to generate energy as I'm running in. So that's how this is handling. Now this pull is actually a little bit dangerous. Raging Squeeze is not to be trifled with, and that's from the crabs. So what they'll do is if people are close enough, they'll just target them and start a squeeze cast. So we're using all of our abilities to keep that under control. We're using our Chaos Novas. You just saw a Typhoon there. Shining Force, we didn't end up using Shining Force, but we used the Priest AoE Fear there to interrupt those. And we did actually end up getting one infested in here, so you see me going over and breaking that. That's from that Stinging Parasite patrol, and the reason we did that is because that patrol actually patrols into the boss area, and we, on this Tyrannical week, on this high of a key, we want the boss area to be completely cleared. So you could theoretically not pull that patrol, but we want to make sure that we have access to the whole space for fighting the Sand Queen. Now here, my Vendetta's not actually back up, so there's a good argument that I should have saved it for the boss fight and just not even use it on that AoE pull. That would have made my opener better here. You see my Vanish is also on cooldown. Vanish was a good thing to use on that number of targets just to put 3 more empowered Garrotes out. Also, if you look at my talents, you'll notice I'm running Toxic Blade instead of Exsanguinate. You could certainly run Exsanguinate here. I probably would do it if I was running this key again. I'd be on Exsanguinate instead of Toxic Blade. But Toxic Blade I chose for this because it's a little bit better at killing off Kahunis really quick. And it means that my Vanish is something that I can use for utility instead of having it be super important to line up with my Vendetta every time, because the combination of Exsanguinate and Exsanguinate loads a lot of damage into your Vanish window. So if you end up vanishing for utility, you lose more damage if you're playing Exsanguinate versus if you're playing Toxic Blade. So this boss fight is not easy, particularly on 19 Tyrannical. You'll see we're trying to keep things under control. Every time you kill one of these drones, the Sand Queen actually gets a Stacking Enrage buff that increases the damage she deals. So that's something that we're trying to keep under control here. We're trying to make sure that she doesn't end up murdering anybody with an upheaval on them while they have a bunch of stacks. You'll see we're getting pretty lucky for it to go on the tank. Also, if need be, I believe Waffle, our Moonkin, is able to actually dispel that enrage off of enemy targets. So if the Sand Queen is enraged at a particularly bad time, he's able to spend a global to do that and help us out. But otherwise, this fight is just about keeping the damage on the boss. This is a great Subtlety Rogue fight because the buzzing drones give you a bunch of targets for your Shuriken Storm, so you can tunnel huge amounts of damage into the boss. But it's not actually, you can't just, the buzzing drones actually stack a lot of damage onto the tank. So it's actually reasonably important to kill them fairly quickly. So it's not like you're just padding on them if you're AoEing them. Like you actually do need to kill them, and that's why you'll see me using globals on abilities like Crimson Tempest. Crimson Tempest, one of my favorite abilities. Okay, so you see Upheaval's on me right now. Upheaval's actually magic damage though, so you can cloak it and take no damage. It's also possible to dodge it if you displace at the right time, after it locks onto your position, but before she actually emerges there. It's very, very dangerous to do that with Shadow Step, because if you mistime it, and you Shadow Step to a friendly or whatever, then she might emerge beneath both of you, and that's really bad to have that happen. But when I play Outlaw, for instance, if you look at my stream clips, for instance, you'll see one called He's Insane, where I was able to use a grappling hook to dodge the upheaval ability. So that's possible. It's also, if you're playing a shadow step spec of rogue, so subtlety or assassination, you could shadow step to a friendly pet of some kind if it's away from other stuff. So for instance, if you're playing with like a Mistweaver or a Brewmaster that puts down an Ox statue or a Jade Serpent statue, you could shadow step to one of those farther away from the boss without running the risk of cleaving somebody else with the damage. It's all kind of minor though. You have cloak and you can just cloak it. It's all kind of just style points unless you get targeted while your cloak is down. But for other classes, abilities like Metamorphosis Leap, like the leap component of Metamorphosis, Heroic Leap, Charge, although that one's also a little sketchy because you'll probably run near your buddies. Blink. Those are all sorts of abilities that you can try and time to dodge an upheaval. It's very finicky. You need a bit of practice. But what I do is I try and displace at about 1 to 0.7 seconds left on that little cast upheaval bar. And that works out reasonably consistently for me when I'm trying to run that. So you see the boss dies here. Very long boss fight. No surprise there. It's tyrannical. All the bosses just take ages. That's the joy of the affix. But the good news is that the trash doesn't take too long here. So we have a parasite pull now. There's an infested here. You want to resist the urge to CC the infested and kill the rest. You just want to pull it all, kill the infested off, and then get the rest of them down. You'll see me here. I'm just bleeding some of the other targets. And then when the Gahoonies come out, we're going to want to kill them. This is a good spot to have Toxic Blade available. It does a lot of damage to the Gahoonies and helps us stop them from infesting. And then we also use Kidney Shot, Typhoon, Psychic Scream thingy, all those abilities. Everybody's just looking for a Gahoonie to start an infest cast, and then they find a way to interrupt it. Then as the last mob's dying here, I run up as a rogue. You can unlock that little grate there. I think blacksmiths and scribes can also do that, but it takes a lot longer than the 1.5 second cast or whatever it took me. So Tol Dagor, much like every other dungeon in this expansion, is one where you want a rogue. Okay, but particularly Tol Dagor because of the interaction with these. There are a lot of things you can unlock that you can't unlock easily without a rogue. See here, I'm picking up a bunch of potions that I had mailed to myself because I'm running very low on Angipots. This was a mistake, obviously. I should have made sure I was full on that before I started the key. So now our Death Knight has gone and grabbed a bunch of trash from upstairs, the 2 mobs from the top of the stairs specifically, and the thug that goes there, and now we're going to kill all of this at once. The thing to watch out for is the crocodiles do this stacking bite physical damage thing. So you really need to make sure that you don't let that stack up to lethal amounts, particularly once the crocodiles are raging. So our answer for that is going to involve kiting once that becomes unmanageable. And we're using abilities like Typhoon, like Shining Force, and our stuns and slows. It's part of the reason that I playing Assassination is good in this particular composition, because I'm the only way to reliably AoE slow, besides that Death and Decay slow, which is not 100% uptime. So the crippling poison that I bring is pretty good. This would be a good spot for a Frost Mage. If I had a Frost Mage, maybe I'd play Outlaw or something in this place. That'd be fun thing to do, but I basically never get to do that because my slow is so vital for our group's composition with the Moonkin and the Havoc in the other slots. Okay, so the pull gets handled there. Good kiting while things are raging. There's also a rock thrower that was in that group, so you need to make sure that one doesn't rage and just murder the tank from afar. Once that gets below 30%, you basically need to focus it until it dies. Now here comes the Brig. There's lots of different ways that you can handle the Brig. Here we're opting to pull both the patrolling stuff and some of the other mobs is going to be the play here. The other mobs by that gate that you can see there. So we're going to do 5 mobs at once here. And it's also, I'm going to be looking for an opportunity to get us buffs. So I'm kind of scouting around now, seeing where the friendly mobs are. There are 4 friendly mobs in the Brig, and they hide behind these gates. And each of them gives you a different buff. So there's a Battle Shout, Blessing of Fortitude, Blessing of Wisdom, and Arcane Intellect. And they stack with the real versions of the buff, so you can have 2 Arcane Intellects on yourself, 1 from a mage or a scroll, and 1 from the mob in here. So it's good to get as many of these as possible. You can always get 3 without pulling anything as a rogue. You're not going to see me do that on this particular run, but on some weeks we skip everything in here, and I just do a stealth mission to get as many buffs as possible. And in those cases, you can always get at least 3, and sometimes you can get 4. So what I'm doing now, I'm opening up the gate to allow my group to go through that way, and then you want to stand between the doors here, because if I stood in line of sight, such that when that gate opened, I would be in range and vision of the enemy looter in there, then it'd pull. My group actually did pull there, though, because they walked by, but you'll see me here. So yeah, standing in the middle of these 2 means that I'm not going to aggro the looters inside the cages, and I can open the cages, then move into stealth, move over here, same deal, open this. and then stealth and meet my group back up. So I've earned us the 4 buffs. My group is doing a pull upstairs, and now I'm going to go join them. And that's how we often do this place. Sometimes we'll even do that place. It's possible to do it while that true sight patrol is actually left intact, and that is a lot trickier. You need to be careful because the thug can see you in stealth, so you need to make sure that you are aware of how it patrols, like watch its patrol a couple times. You can look on the MDT, the method dungeon tools, and it does a pretty good job of showing exactly where it patrols. And then you just want to open the cages on the other side while it's on one side of its patrol, and then sneak around the back way and get to where it was when it patrols back to where you were. It's pretty sketchy though. I mess it up from time to time because the radius on the true sight is very annoyingly large. Okay, so now we're entering the detention block. This is where the second boss is. I'm sapping an infested, and we're going to kill some non-infested stuff here. The sea speakers have a couple of abilities that are notable. The sea blast is just a huge damage hit on the tank, and on higher Keystone levels, it's pretty important to kick. Whereas watery dome, if that cast goes off, it's going to buff all nearby enemies with a shield that what we do is if that ever goes off, we just use one of our blood elves or our mass dispels to remove that from everybody. So if you're in a group that doesn't have access to that easily, that's a high priority to kick. But we've actually found that the higher the keystones we've done, the lower priority the watery dome kick is, and the higher priority just the sea blasts are, because we can deal with watery dome with a blood elf or with a mass dispel, but we can't deal with the salt blast doing a zillion damage to our tank. So you'll see there that I got a re-stealth, and I got in with the Garrote silence on the sea speaker. That's a good way to get some value. You get the long reprieve from them casting when you hit the casters with the Garrote silence. So you should always be looking for opportunities to silence mobs that does something relevant too. Here, one problem with the pulling multiple infested mobs at the same time. Well, I don't know where that shining sent that Kahuni to, but luckily it looks like it died. One problem with pulling 3 infested mobs at the same time is when one of the mobs dies and you get the 2 spawns of Gahoon, they'll be in the healing range of infested, so they'll actually require more damage to kill. So it's important to be ready for that. Ideally, you DPS the 3 infested mobs such that they die around the same time, and then you just AoE down 6 Gahoonies that aren't healing. But realistically, often you just have to actually kill the Gahoonies through the percent health heal from being adjacent to an infested mob. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure that you don't leave them at 2% and just hope that dots kill them, because they will heal up because of the infested that they are next to. All right, so now we're doing an arsonist pull in this little corner area here that looks like the arsonists have been successful and have set some stuff on fire over here. That's a nice little bit of flavor going on in the dungeon here, but arsonists aren't too damaging. They throw a torch that is a magic damage dot on the tank, but it's magic, so it can just be dispelled, and it does stack, but it's not too threatening, mainly because it can be dispelled. Okay, so looking around, killing off these last 2. Sometimes our route includes the raiders that are locked up in the cages, and sometimes it doesn't. Often we'll pull some raiders from the cages with the stuff, with the boss actually here. Okay, so this pull is really annoying. This block warden is both raging, and he just has naturally an unremovable plus 100% damage thing on him. So it's very important that he doesn't get to your tank either on fortified weeks or on raging weeks, and even on tyrannical weeks. You should just not let him touch your tank. So you just stun him, get in there, tank builds some threat, and then when the stun expires, the tank is out of there. It does not take any melees from that block warden. Make sure you don't stand in his lockdown either, because that will do a tremendous amount of damage too, because for some reason that particular warden is just, I think it's because he's on such low health that he gets that buff to his damage. So that's what he's the priority to kill first, and that's going to be true even on bolstering weeks. So you can't let that thing stay alive, so don't get tricked into leaving it up. Now we finish off the rest of the mobs in this pack. Make sure you grab this arsonist that actually starts near the boss with this pull. And now you see I'm going to go grab us the raiders. I threw a Tricks of the Trade on the old tank there. That was actually a little bit poor what happened there, so I threw a Tricks of the Trade, and then I kind of questioned myself, stutter stepped back, and I threw a knife. Don't know what that is. Threw a knife at the mob we were already in combat with, and that caused my Tricks of the Trade timer to start ticking. So that was a bit of a weird event there. So yeah, now we're getting all 5 of the raiders. Each of these give 1 count each, so they are worth grabbing, and also it means that you won't have to deal with them during the boss fight here. That can be particularly valuable. It's like a little bit good with with Volcanic, that's a nice thing to be able to avoid, but it's particularly good on weeks like the week that happened after the one from this recording, which was an explosive week. All right, so Flashing Daggers comes out. This is not parryable, but it is dodgeable, so you'll see the Demon Hunter dodges it with a Death Sweep there, and I dodge it by throwing off my evasion, and that lets us just stay in during our cooldowns and do more damage that way. Otherwise, you have to line of sight it around one of the little pillars, but why do that when you have an evasion or when you can just hold your blade, your Death Sweep for a couple seconds? And then Howling Fear, that needs to be kicked. Howling Fear does this kind of annoying thing where for every kick except for a Shaman kick, which is like 12 seconds, everybody uses 15 seconds though, it's not actually possible to kick every single one. You can like kick the first early and then kick the second late and then you'd miss the third. So that's why you saw there. We have two total people kicking that, even though ideally it would just be Demon Hunter kicking every time. And that's not 100%, like it varies a little bit, obviously, if he interrupts his cast or does something else in the same slot, but so now here comes the stun. Now this week in particular, this Volcanic week, you need to make sure your ranged are actually spread apart from each other so that you don't get multiple volcanoes under both of them while they are stunned during that phase, because that has happened to us before and caused deaths. So that's a fun little thing to avoid on Volcanic week. Otherwise there's kind of nothing threatening in this entire boss fight. This is one of the easiest boss fights in this expansion. Bobby Hollis is... So the way this works is that he casts... So Jess Hollis now gets to the end. He starts channeling this Motivating Cry, and you have 45 seconds to kill him. Even if he comes out of this Motivating Cry, you can just purge it off him. It's a magic effect, so you could Spell Steal it or Dispel it, whatever you want. So that's not something to worry about. You don't want to kick him because then you have to deal with all his other abilities. And Bobby Hollis... he is supposed to, so he gets a shield and he teleports to somebody and he starts like mauling them and they get stunned. And it's supposed to be that you have to do like from the UI, it looks like it's a protected cast. So you're not supposed to be able to kick it until the shield has gone off. But in practice, you just can kick it and it stops the cast even if he has that shield still on him. So because of that, you don't even need to worry about Bobby at all. You just have your tank kick him as soon as he goes on somebody else, and that is a non-ability. You'll see here, because it's 19 Tyrannical, we did actually get some more abilities, and in fact, Bobby Hollis cast a Howling Fear over from the other side of the room, which is that is something that he does as well at the end there. He mirrors Jess's abilities in that way. That's something we hadn't seen before, but it spooked us quite a bit on this particular fight. Even with everybody dying to that, because of that weird overlap thing that happened there, the fight was still... The boss was so low that we were able to kill it. But that was almost a wipe there. That was almost the end of the Keystone. So that's something to be aware of if you're on a very high key, is once that Motivating Cry cast ends, those sorts of things happen, and you need to be kicking the Howling Fear on Bobby as well as Jess. All right, so now we're getting towards the top of the Tol Dagor. You'll notice, of course, our enemy forces percent still below 70%, so we're going to be killing some stuff with cannons. There are some strategies that involve killing nothing with cannons, but the more we've done this, the more we've realized that you just, despite the fact that cannons are finicky and annoying and have a big opportunity for something to go wrong, they're just too efficient to avoid, and they give you too good... the ratio of how hard it is to do is worth that risk because of how much percent you get in such little time if it works. So our routes incorporate killing stuff with cannons later and not killing a bunch of stuff in the prison. We skip a lot of the trash in the ascent to the top of the prison and the stuff outside. We could have killed more stuff in the very first room, for instance, but that would have required pulling infested stuff, and that slows you down. So killing these officers, killing these thugs, they all have a lot of annoying casts. Riot Shield is something that is not kickable and needs to be stunned on these mobs, whereas the other stuff is interruptible and needs to be interrupted. Abilities like Handcuff and the Shout. So you see there we used an Imprison on the one that can see stealth, and then I ran up and sapped the one that couldn't. We're just going to skip those mobs, and then we're going to Shroud here, and I'm going to update my sap to be on this spotter so that we can get past it. This means that we have to do no trash in that particular room. It's not a big problem, though, if you want to do some trash in there, if your route incorporates that, and often on different weeks we do. Now we're going to be killing this stuff here, so our tank fires off the old Speedy Pot, grips over the caster to there. I tricks the tank before I hop in here, and the interesting thing is, because this is not a cast from me shooting the cannon, my threat is going to be redirected to snap here. But if you look at my tricks debuff or my tricks buff in the top right, it's not actually ticking down. So for a full 30 seconds instead of just 6 seconds, I'm redirecting threat from these cannons. That's part of why Rogue is so good in this place as well, is in addition to the shroud skips, the opening gates, the Trix cannon interaction is really favorable. So we pull this whole hallway, and that means we get access to that second cannon, which our Demon Hunter is now in. We're mass gripping. We're using all of our controlling movement abilities to try and keep these mobs close together so that we can kill them all. Which we're doing, and it's important to do that. It's important to hit as many mobs as possible with your cannon shots, because that will actually interrupt their casts. You'll see things have gone a little bit askew here. We died, we wiped, and that is something that happens with the cannons. There's just a lot of annoying casts. There's those barrels that are from Knight Captain Valeri's room. You'll recognize from there, and they're obnoxious. If you hit them with the cannon, they will explode too. So you see there, even though this mob can see stealth, if you shadow step and sap really quick, you can get the sap off before you get detected. So that's what I've done there, but now we still need to wait for our Demon Hunter to release. Oh no, we don't. We can just go through here because Waffle Sauce and I are good. So we're kind of on the fly now. We're figuring out how we're going to salvage this. And what we're going to do is we're just going to sneak by and get a res on our healer. Is the plan. So we're communicating now. We're saying like, hey, are you in a spot where you can be rezzed? Yes. Okay. Not everybody has to release. We're just going to res our healer. Our healer's going to mass res. Hopefully our one problem you might have just noticed there, if you noticed up on the map, is that our Demon Hunter is actually dead hundreds of yards away, way down at the other end of the prison, which means that he's not going to be in range of the mass res here. So his options, like he could have released, but if he'd released, he would have just died in range. And then gotten masked, so we would have lost some time on that. So instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to burn a battle res on him. Waffle Sauce is going to go and hit him with the rebirth down where he is. And these are just kind of the quick adjustments you need to make here. You'll see this cost us about 3 minutes overall, but because the rest of our route is so good, we're actually able to sustain this, and we're still in range of timing this key. And so yeah, now we tried the same pull again. We absolutely have to. You can't. With the cannon area, a lot of stuff is going to go wrong. What went wrong there that really got us was the cannon, or the barrels exploding on people. So, and that's a kind of a common thread for us, is that the barrels create a lot of problems in this area. So in future, we are going to try and do a better job of moving them way out of the way of where anything bad can happen. So yeah, now we've got all of them grouped up again. It's important to be economical with your ability usage of things like mass grip. You only get one, and you need to make sure that you get good value out of it, because it's just vital. And treants, you can see there, are distracting all the mobs, keeping them in place. When you hit the mobs with your cannon, that'll interrupt their cast. It'll interrupt suppression fire. It'll interrupt riot shield. It'll interrupt handcuff. Unless sometimes when you hit them, it doesn't actually move them, and then they won't get interrupted. So if you hit them like dead on, sometimes they won't move, and that's really frustrating. But for the most part, every time you hit them with the cannons, it nudges them a little bit, and that stops all their casts. So that's part of why it's so important. In addition to just being more efficient damage-wise to be hitting as many of them as possible, you actually reduce the damage on your group because you stop them from getting all these annoying casts off. So now I'm trying to find a way to actually hit this officer here. It's very finicky. Shooting the cannons is very annoying. I'm pretty bad at it overall. Taking a lot of practice to get to the point where I'm able to hit most of my cannons where I want them to go, particularly the further down they are, the harder it is. So now we're moving up. We're going to pull this next stuff. I'm waiting for the tank to dismount so I can get another Trix on him. And now there's one infested here, and we are going to be careful. We're pulling everything else, and we're just going to try and line it around so that we get away from that infested. We want to get both those packs there so that we can kill as many things as possible, as efficiently as possible. We don't want to break that into two pulls, which would be easier to do with the infested. But it's important here that I don't knock them back towards the infested and get the mobs in range of that heal. As you'll see there, we use single grip and treants to kind of group these up, and we've got all but one in our cannons now, which is good news. That's great news even. And this pull is actually going very smoothly. One thing you have to look out for as well here with cannons is you don't see it now, but because I'm shooting like this corner portion of Tol Dagor. But if you see along the middle where we just walked, the wall. It's kind of difficult to describe, but the wall along the walkway, the inside wall along the walkway, if you hit that, you can sometimes pull things through from the inside of the dungeon, and that is really tragic. That causes all kinds of problems. So you got to be really careful if you're shooting mobs down the walkway parts to aim at the outside and make sure that your cannonballs are never hitting through the wall. Because then it's very easy to wipe the group doing that. One thing you saw me do there as well is I jumped out of the cannon, I cloaked because there was magic damage on me, and I refreshed my Tricks of the Trade on Snap. Jumping out of cannons and cloaking or evasioning or vanishing to reset threat as needed and re-upping your tricks of the trade is something you often find yourself needing to do. And then one thing also is that the cannons do no damage to Gahoonies, so I hop out of the cannon to kill the Gahoonies. All right, so now we got 7 minutes, 59 seconds. It's going to be tight here. We've killed all the enemy forces that we need to, but we still have 2 bosses here, and we have a skip that we need to execute on the trash that's in front of us. So you'll see we're starting here by moving barrels off to one side. We're clearing one of the corners. And now we are not going to... Our strategy involves not having to move very many barrels. So by moving the one barrel at the start to the other side, this corner is now definitely going to be a safe spot when she casts her first Cinder Flame. And then from there, by not moving barrels, we should be able to keep the barrels kind of in a controlled burn where there's not a critical mass of barrels that builds up. So you'll see here we've got our corner safe spot. One thing that you might be tempted to do is pulling barrels from inside the room to outside the room at the start. That's a big trap. If you do that, the way the AI works here is if they detect that there aren't enough barrels in there, the guy from upstairs is going to throw down more. So right at the start, instead of having... So if you move nothing out of the room, there are 4 barrels in the room, but say you move those front 2 barrels outside of the room, right at the start you'll have the 2 barrels in the back and they'll immediately throw 4 more in. So don't be tricked into doing that. We've done that before, and it's been bad. So yeah, you'll see there we managed to have a safe spot. We didn't actually end up having to move barrels, which is good. Now we're moving over into this other corner. You want to keep the boss kind of central so that she doesn't actually end up hitting like the whole room's worth. If you bring her to a corner and she shoots outside of the corner, she can just make the whole room not a safe spot. And you'll see there as well, Snap has moved one of the barrels outside of this corner to keep it a safe spot. We do have to do some of that, but the main goal of our strategy is to keep it so that DPS do not ever have to worry about moving barrels, because we just can't afford to lose that damage, right? We can't afford to have Waffle spend 5 globals picking up a barrel and then running it somewhere and then dropping it off. So there you see the Cinder Flame going off again. When fresh barrels spawn, they're actually immune from being hit for a couple seconds, so it's a good thing to avoid. You'll see I just fired off my cloak there. It was a little bit of a suspect cloak. I was a bit worried that I was going to die from the small circles there, but it turns out that was a stupid fear and it was a stupid cloak, and then I died from a real circle there. Yeah, definitely needed to be better positioned on that. I thought I was a little bit outside the circle, but obviously I was not. And looking back at it now, it just looks bad. It's just one of the things that can happen. So you can see now I'm not happy about how that went. We don't have the battle res to spare, which means that because we used one on Zach earlier, our demon hunter, during that cannon skip when he was not in range of being masked. So now I just get to kind of sit here on the floor and watch the rest of the fight go out, and this is agonizing for me. This is the kind of stuff that really sucks. But on the upside, looking at the timer, the boss is going to die. If you look over in the bottom right, just above my deaths log, I have a weak aura that tracks about how long until the boss dies. It looks like it's going to be another half a minute or so. So there'll be 4 minutes, 30 seconds left on the clock, which means if we're good, we can, and we don't flub our skip to the last boss, we should be able to pull him with maybe 4 minutes left on the clock, maybe 3 minutes 30. And the fight is hard, but it's not a long fight. It's not too bad. We should be able to get it done with 3.5 minutes. So I'm excited about our prospects of still being able to kill this. One thing that's important to note here as well is that our graveyard is going to update when Valeri dies. So as soon as it's over, I'm immediately releasing, and I'll release right in the middle of this room. And that's one of the things you kind of have to learn is just where all the graveyard checkpoints are, because they're inconsistent in this expansion. In some dungeons, it just never changes. You always res at the start. And in some dungeons, it updates after every boss you kill. In Tol Dagor specifically, it updates after you kill Jess, and it updates after you kill Knight Captain. It doesn't update after you kill the Sand Queen, though. Or I think it might actually update after you kill the Sand Queen, now that I think about it. So it might just update after every boss. Ignore the false information I was just spreading. So we got an Imprison on the True Sight mob. Now we're going to Shroud. I'm going to sap the one, and then we're all going to run through that one that's sapped. And now I'm just mounting up. I'm going to pull these 2 True Sight mobs off to the side. And the rest of my group is going to run through the other side. And then once they're through, and once I got to make sure that I get my Vanish off here outside of range of still being seen by them in True Sight. So it's a little bit sketchy. And then we've got 3 minutes, 44 seconds left when we pull this boss. So we pull instantly. We don't wait for anything to kind of get set up. We need all the time we can. We don't wait for me to get topped before the start there, because I took a melee as I was running by. We'll just do that during the fight. Now this fight is there's a huge amount of RNG in this fight. It's not particularly hard to execute, but those explosive bursts, they apply a dot to the targets, and they'll refresh a dot if they're already on a target. And it's actually possible for that to happen in a short enough gap that there will be double stacks on people. And when that happens, it's the amount of healing that's required to keep people up through that. It basically requires a healer cooldown. And our healer is very good. She can handle large amounts of damage when it's sometimes, but sometimes you'll just get 4 of those in a row, and everybody will be out of cooldowns and everybody will just die. So that's a failure case on this fight that basically nobody is immune to. Now, one thing that we do on this fight that is good is the dead shot is actually a dodgeable ability. The arrow that's reminiscent of like the Blackrock Hold charge where somebody has to soak it, and whoever soaks it can't soak it again. Well, it turns out that somebody actually can soak every single one if they're a demon hunter. So Zach is basically going to be soaking every Deadeye if he needs to. If something goes wrong and he doesn't have Death Sweep or available, the first time it's fine, and then if that happens a second time, he can just call for me to run in. I can take one normally, and then I can evasion one. So we've got a lot of overlap here on stopping that being too much damage. You can't cloak the upfront damage of it, but you can cloak the dot off yourself, and you can cloak the damage component of the explosive burst circle as well. You can't cloak the knockback component though. So those are just some of the ways the abilities work here. This boss fight, though, otherwise, you see we've got our positions here. The reason we fight in this corner is because it gives our 2 ranged here, Mischief and Waffle Sauce, these little cubbies where they won't actually get knocked back very far. They'll just get knocked into the corner that they're standing in. And then us melee kind of play in the middle here. Both Zach and I are very mobile players, so he can Fell Rush back in, I can Shadow Step back in. So if we get just knocked back, it's no big deal. We just use our movement ability, we get back in that way. You'll see now this is where things start to get sketchy. There's 2 stacks now. For a brief moment there were 2 stacks of the dot on 3 people. Now there are just 2 stacks on 2 people. Mischief and Waffle Sauce, you see their health on the raid frames, very, very tenuous, lots of damage going on them. Luckily we survive, but sometimes that can just happen 7 times in a row and nobody has anything left to save them. And that's a really dumb part of this fight because it is just so RNG. Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. All right, now I've got an explosive burst on me. The boss fight is actually getting pretty low here, so yeah, I didn't actually know if I was going to cloak it, but my instinct looking at that situation was I want to cloak this because the fight is about to end, so I'm not going to get a better cloak. Let me just cloak for value now. And now my instinct is, all right, I'm going to get in here. I'll evasion this because the fight's about to end. I'm not going to get a better evasion, so I'll just do that now. That means that Zach can use his Blade Dance as part of his rotation instead of saving it for that Deadeye. Because it is a bit of a damage loss for him to do that, and you'll see actually on the damage meters, he probably lost maybe 500 DPS or so from saving the Blade Dances in order to dodge that ability, but it's worth it because it makes the mechanic trivial. So that's us, beat the timer there, despite the fact that we had a pretty full wipe there, and we had another boss fight that also went a bit bad. But yeah, timer upgraded, beat it with a couple seconds to spare, 28 seconds to spare, pretty great run. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any feedback, that kind of stuff. Obviously, you're supposed to do the follow or whatever thing if you liked it. And yeah, I'll see you guys for the next one.